Okay. Okay. Good evening. It's been a while since we've met, and it's been a while since it's been dark outside when we started our class, um, which is part of what I want to talk about for a minute before we actually begin with the text. Um, for some of us, this time period began on the second day of Elul with Slichot. We're talking 7 weeks of the time period of Tkufa that brought us to the post-chagim time period. For some, it's a little bit less. Slichot starting just before Rosh Hashanah. But in either case, it's a significant chunk of the year that's dedicated to introspection, reconnection, all kinds of things. And we come to a day like today. I'm sorry, I'm just a little pontificating here at the beginning, but I have the stage, so I might as well. We have no slichot, we have no shofar, you have no kittel, you have no sukkah, you have no fast day. You don't have the arba minim, no etrog, no lulav, etc. You don't have a kafot. You don't have the dancing. It's like all that we were focused on and building towards, and all the food and all the meals and all the meals, and just everything that happened till now, and then it's done. It's done. As people said, there's a few different expressions. Chagim sameach, chazlash, which is chozrim the shigra, back to routine. And even though I say it myself, it's back to routine and all that, I think that would be the biggest disaster for all of us. Rav Matisyahu Solomon, who is the Mashgiach Ruchani of Lakewood Yeshiva in the United States, after 9/11, gave a speech that I actually have in his name given over more or less years ago on, I think it was Shabbat Shuvah. And he said that after 9/11, one of the rallying calls from all different sectors around the world, especially in the United States, was we have to get back to routine. He said that's the worst idea. We have to move forward to change. And the truth is that we have now an opportunity, because from now, actually starting with Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan until Hanukkah, there really is nothing on the calendar that is anything of significance other than that makes us have to build something, check something, clean something, cook something special, other than just regular Shabbatot and Rosh Chodesh. And therefore, that becomes a proving ground. We're all talk? Is all this a show? Was this something we really want to change? Do we want to make an adjustment that we talked about on Yom Kippur, and we said about on Hoshana Rabbah, we said maybe even on Shmini Atzeret, or is it just, we mumble the words and we say what we're supposed to say and we go on with our merry lives after that? Someone pointed out to me, not to me, I was in Moroccan Shul on the night of, when was this? The first night of Sukkot. I was there a lot, but I'm saying especially this, I heard the first night of Sukkot. And I never thought about this before. If you go back to the time of the Torah, and until the story of Purim and the story of Hanukkah, from the time you finished Sukkot / Shmini Atzeret until you got to Pesach, there was nothing. There was no Hanukkah. There was no Purim. There was nothing. And so we say Mar Cheshvan, the bitter month of Cheshvan, because it doesn't have it. There was Mar Cheshvan, Mar Kislev, Mar Tevet, everything was, there was nothing there. So that we called it Zman Simchatenu, because we needed to really charge our battery enough to help us make it through this time period. It's a time period where things go into Tardema, into like a suspended animation. The trees start to get a little bit different. The sky is darker. Our days end earlier. At least I don't know about you, but it's when we change the clocks in a couple of weeks. Come home from Marv at 5:15. I'm ready to go to sleep. It's like this heaviness that just descends on a person, and what is it we need in order to get us through that? Was the Kufar, the time period we just went through. And that's part of the message of this whole thing of the Yamin Noraim, and followed by the Chag of Sukkot, the Zman Simchatenu, that is supposed to help us energize us, plugging in our phone when it's almost on zero, to let it go to 100. So it gives us this time in order to spread that joy that we have for the Chagim and spread it over. And what really just brings us joy. So another point, and then we'll get to the text, trust me. But I think it's important because it works into this whole idea of what we're talking about. And for those of you in the Mesilat Yesharim class, I might repeat some of this tomorrow. The holiday of Sukkot seems to have almost a bipolar approach in one area, and that has to do in the Ashkenazi world. It's called Zman Simchatenu. It says Vayita Ach Sameach. We have to be exceedingly happy. And yet on Shabbat Chol Hamoed in the Ashkenazi world, the book of Kohelet is written. Now, not only is the book of Kohelet very depressing, Havel Havalim Amar Kohelet Havel Kol Havel, everything's just vanity, everything's just meaningless, and on and on and on. Not only that, the Gemara tells us that when they were looking to decide on what's called the canonization of the Tanakh, what would be considered the books of Tanakh, Bikshu Lignoz Sefer Kohelet. They wanted to bury Sefer Kohelet because of the fact that it had all this depression in it, and they didn't feel that was necessarily a book that belonged. It put us that way, Sefer Yol for a minute. It didn't belong in the Tanakh. And it says, except for one pasuk saved it, and that's the very last, or second to last pasuk. Sof davar kol nishma. The end of the day, after we hear everything, sof davar kol nishma et Elokim yira vet mitzotav shemor ki zeh kol adam. We have to be God-fearing people. We have to serve Hashem. We have to do His mitzvot. How does that answer the question? Because we think in terms of what brings us joy. It's supposed to be very happy. And I just said that this other idea was bringing this joy through the course of the winter until we get to Pesach. We have to have this joy. But all kinds of things bring us joy, right? It could be eating. It could be watching a movie. It could be going for a walk. It could be learning Torah. Whatever it might be, the things that bring us joy. And what Kohelet is telling us is putting these two ideas together, that a lot of what we think it brings us joy can be fleeting, and very often it is, and that isn't really a source of true joy. We've talked about in Tanya multiple times, and we'll continue talking about it. There are things that we do that if they're done because they're being done in order to make us better Jews and closer to Hashem, then that already takes away the klipa and raises it to level kedusha. And that's what he's telling us, that in general, most of the things that bring us the joy are havalim. But sof davar kol nishma, at the end of the day, after we listen to everything, et Elokim yira mitzotav shemor ki zeh kol adam means that we take those things that are joyous to us, the Torah things, and what we may see as non-Torah, which we'll call klipa, and then we remove the klipa and we use it to serve Hashem. That's the true joy. And that's why it's not a bipolar kind of an approach, but it's a clarification in its own. Okay, so now I've given you your drasha for next year for Sukkot and for Shmini Atzeret. You don't have to go to shul. You have my permission to stay home now. Yeah, right. The thumbs up. Okay, where are we holding? So we are the latter part of Parak Yud, or chapter 10. We only have a few lines left because I mentioned, I think there's a bracketed statement near the end of a few lines I'm not going to do. It's more Kabbalistic, and I don't want to get into that. If you're interested, just let me know, and I'll send you a link to where you can read up more about that. But this chapter deals exclusively with the topic of tzaddik. We talked about what does it mean at tzaddik v'ralo and tzaddik v'tovlo, and the topic or the expression we talked about way at the beginning of the book, months and months ago, and we said we'll have to wait and see what that really means. And it doesn't mean that things that go well for the tzaddik or things that go bad for the tzaddik. That's how we normally use that expression, right? We see that in Sefer Yov, speaking of Job, which he may or may not have ever existed. Again, the Gemara discusses he may all be one large allegory. But tzaddik v'ralo, he's a tzaddik, and things go bad for him. We talk about that concept, and we have Rasha v'tovlo, and things go good for the Rasha, but that's not the definition that Tanya is using. He uses the idea of tzaddik v'ralo, where he has virtually gotten rid of his Yetzer Hara. He's been able to clear out that left side of his heart. Again, we're speaking metaphorically, we're talking spiritually, but there's still some little nitiyah, some little turning towards not good. It's not 100% pure yet. That's the tzaddik v'ralo. What does it mean it's bad for him? It doesn't mean it's bad. It means there's still something there. It's a shred of something. And just like we saw by the idea of a Benoni, we saw the idea of all different types of levels that a person can be at, tens of thousands of possible levels. So too, he said that when it comes to tzaddik v'ralo, there's tens of thousands of possibilities. Why? Because let's say you have a tzaddik, a perfect tzaddik be 100%. But you may have a tzaddik v'ralo, it's 99.3%, it wants 99.2%, it wants 99.8%. So there's an unlimited amount of possibilities, and therefore there are tens of thousands of levels, so to speak, of a tzaddik v'ralo. And also he said that outwardly, The tzaddik v'ralo doesn't look any different than tzaddik v'tovlo because they're talking about an internal thing. He doesn't do anything wrong. He does everything right. But internally, there still may be this. I just wish I could tell someone this one thing. I know it's Russian hard, but I'm overcoming it. But the fact that he even wants to has this desire and he still has to crush that, he is yet to reach the level of the tzaddik in the definition of the Balatanya. Then he said that he calls these people the true tzaddik, the tzaddik v'tovlo, which means his tov, the good rules everything. He's been able to clean his heart completely from the Yetzer Hara. He's able to do this and these other things we said. They're also called b'nei aliyah, the children who've gone up, or the upwardly mobile. Maybe this is the original yuppie, but they weren't necessarily young. If you don't know, the history behind yuppie is really an acronym: young, upwardly mobile people, something or other. So that's where it actually comes from. Yeah, that's people, growing up in that time, not growing up, I was an adult, but I'm saying it's, certain things stick in your head. It's like when you say scuba, it's, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. It's not a real word. It's made up. Anyways, okay, now you really need to know what a scuba is. What we're going to hear, let me put on the screen the last part of this. Okay. So he's going to give us a reason or an idea. What does it mean? Why are these people who are called tzaddikim? And again, the tzaddik v'tovlo. Why are they also called b'nei aliyah? Okay, well, I just have it highlighted here at the beginning. If you're using a book and not the screen, we're about 3/4 of the way through the chapter. If you near the end, you'll see a bracketed statement. So it's a few lines before that. It starts with the words. There's 2 dots before it in the book. V'od nikraim b'nei aliyah. Furthermore, these people, meaning the tzaddik v'tovlo, are called b'nei aliyah for another reason. When they do the mitzvot from the perspective of aseh tov, meaning they're doing it for the right reason, and they're doing a positive mitzvah, b'kiyum Torah, as they keep the Torah mitzvoteha. Why is it being done? L'tzorech gavoa umala mala aruma ma'alot. The only reason they're doing it, because Hashem said so. They're doing it because Hashem said to do the mitzvah with absolutely no ego, with no klipa, with no Yetzer Hara, with no anything. They're doing it only to serve Hashem on this highest possible level. And for those of you in the sharing class, we're actually going to talk about that tomorrow when we get to the next topic, Chassidut. And they are not doing it. Look what he says, v'lo, and they're not doing the mitzvot. They're not doing it only because they want to cling to God. Nor are they doing it to quench their thirst, to be closer to God. Let he who is thirsty come and drink from the water, meaning the water of Torah. They're not doing it to quench the thirst. Why? If I'm like thirsting for Hashem, we talked about this already. If I'm thirsting to serve Hashem, I'm thirsting to do the mitzvot, and I want to quench that thirst by doing a mitzvah. That's because if there's ego. I'm doing it because I want to quench my thirst to serve God. You have to take you out of the equation. To be a tzaddik, you have to be completely out of the equation. If you want to be a tzaddik for tovlo, you're completely out of the equation. There's no you, there's no ego whatsoever involved at that point. Ella, rather, Pirshu b'tikunim, as was said in the Tikunim Zohar, Ezu chasid amit chased im kono, who is considered a chassid, who is considered pious, who is doing pious acts with his creator. Now it's a play on words. We know we say when I say koneh hakol means God is the creator of all. The word ken, kuf, nun also means a nest. So it means that you're doing it, you're serving, you're working im ken delay. What are you doing? You're doing it to serve the master of this ken, of the nest. What does that mean? Let me explain to you what this means. We've talked about this a little before. That part of the goal in doing mitzvot is that we have we create a connection between this world and the upper world, between our world of Asiyah and the world of Hashem, also known as Atzilut and other things we'll talk about. it says, before I do a mitzvah, for example, before I daven, before I do certain mitzvot, I say L'Shem Yichud Kucha Brichu. And in that L'Shem Yichud Kucha Brichu is the equivalent of Hinin Muchanum Zuman by Ashkenazim. It says Liyachta Shem Yod-He Be'od Vav-He. You're trying to connect the letters Yud-He along with the letters Vav-He, which again, I'm not going to get into that now, but it's a concept of trying to blend the two worlds, the upper world and the lower world. And it says that the goal of the tzaddik when he's doing a mitzvah is nothing to do with himself, nothing to do with wanting to make sure he gets extra points before Rosh Hashanah, nothing to do with the fact that he's trying to help someone because he'll feel better because he knows this guy needs it. He's only doing it because Hashem wants him to do the mitzvah and because he wants to make this stronger connection between the Shamayim, i.e. Hashem, and this world. As is mentioned in Parshat Ki Tetzei, Kibra, like a child, the Ishtadel Batravue goes after Ime goes after his mother and father. The Rachimlan Yater Migarme, the Nafshe, the Ravche, Baruche Nishmate, Masagarme Lemita, Alaihu, Lemifrak Lon. My words, not his right now. You would take a bullet for your parent. You do anything. You know, you're not, if God forbid someone's attacking your parent, this is the expression, example is using that you care for more for your parent and he cares for you more than anyone else for your life, for your neshama, hopefully, that you would protect your parent and the parent would protect you, would take a bullet for you. The idea being it's hadadi. It is both ways. How do you say hadadi? Mutual. There we go. It's mutual. It goes both ways. I actually came across an article recently that talked about the idea of persons who's bilingual, not even if they're not fluent. I don't consider myself fluent 100% in Hebrew, but I'm pretty good, Baruch Hashem. But when you start using what's not your mother tongue, and that's what comes out first, and you don't remember the original word of your mother tongue, it's a sign that you're getting pretty close to that switch over. So I guess it's on one hand, it's a good thing. On the bad hand, it's a bad hand. On the other, see, I can't speak English. On the other hand, he said, I'm trying to have a normal conversation with someone in the States and I throw in a Hebrew word and I don't remember what it means. That's not good. So he's telling us here that, again, that the idea of what does it mean to be this tzaddik v'tov lo, you work to serve Hashem. You have no ego involved. You've gotten rid of the Yetzer Hara, even a netiyah or turning to, that's not the right word either, but an inclination towards doing something, even in your mind, not to do it. Forget the doing, but it's the inclination to think about wanting to do it. Reciprocal, that's a better word. Thank you, Dave. Instead of hadadi is mutual, it's reciprocal. Very good. And it is to make this connection. We're going to see a slide in a moment from Rav Steinsaltz. Liyachta kucha bricho b'tachtonim, to connect, to unite Hashem with this world. Let's take a look at the slide. We'll understand a little bit more. Okay. To connect, to unite Hashem and his Shekhinah, his divine presence, b'tachtonim, in this lower world. A chassid. It's very interesting. I've told you this many times that my worlds collide almost on a daily basis with what I learn, with what I see. I'm learning something in my halacha yomi, shulchan aruch yomi, whatever, today, and having nothing to do with this time period. It has to do with nidarim, with about vows, and it mentions something in there about Shabbat Bereshit. That's what this week is, Shabbat Parshat Bereshit. I mean, it's constant. And I had no plans to plan it this way, but we're going to talk about the title Chassid tomorrow, and it's almost exactly where we're going to start tomorrow. And we see that to show you. So he says the word Chassid should be very Chazal. Every time that the Chazal, Chachamenu, Zichronam, Livracha, rabbis of blessed memory or sages of blessed memory, when they use the term Chassid, in place of that word, the Balatanya uses the concept Tzaddik Gamur. Hechasid, Tzaddik Gamur, Uzeh shemitchased im kono. It's a person who acts piously with his creator. He acts not for his own sake. He's not looking for this meshing with God. Okay, here's another word that I can't remember in English. When you merge, there we go. in order to to cling to God, not to merge with God. What he does only for Hashem. What reason? We say it every single day that we want Hashem glory to fill the world. You and I have that job. Whether you're a tzaddik or you're like me, not a tzaddik. Our job by doing mitzvot, when we do them the right way, even if you do only one a day like this, will help to bring kavod to this world, because the more the Shekhinah comes down into this world, the more the divine presence comes into this world, the more kavod there is in this world. So when we do a mitzvah, when we're doing it for ourselves, meaning because I want to satisfy something, or I want to check something off on my list that had to get done, it brings some of the Shekhinah into this world, but not to the same level. Again, we're talking metaphysical ideas and spiritual ideas. The Gabei Tzaddik Gamur, when it comes to the Tzaddik Gamur, the perfect Tzaddik, Hashela shehavayatohu atzmit, echan hi yomedet mahi osa, where the question of his existence, his independent existence, and his status, and where he stands in this world and what he does, nishkach b'toch haratzon lashot b'shvil hakadosh baruch hu. It's lost. It's lost completely in the person's desire to just serve God. I gave you the example before, taking a bullet for somebody. Let's assume for a moment, God forbid, someone were trying to attack one of my children. And I had the opportunity, I had two choices. Either I can protect my child, or I can go after the killer, or the attempted killer. And I'm pretty sure with that split-second decision that I'm not going to be as quick to get that guy disarmed. But I know that if I jump in front, I will protect my child. It's not because I'm doing it because I need to satisfy my parental need. That's not the goal. The goal is my child, 100% the focus, nothing else. It's not because I checked off and I want to be called a hero after I get shot. It's not because I want to end up in the newspapers. It's not that I want to be, given the Medal of Honor or something like that. It's because it's my child. And that's what I'll do without even thinking about it. There's one situation. I don't know if I've ever told the story publicly. I'll tell it briefly. It's a very quick story. Back in the days when in the United States, when they're moving over from everything full service gas stations, which was called a filling station growing up, and a service station, whatever, they were moving into partially full serve and self-serve. So my mom was driving, and I don't know if I was 17 even. We pulled into a gas station up to a full service pump, and we were waiting. And the guy who was supposed to fill the car, was a snot-nosed little teenager himself, probably all of 18, and he didn't pay attention. He had his back to us. And then my mom yelled, "Toot," and he turned around, he flipped her off. He gave her the finger. I was in the passenger seat. And I'm not exaggerating, within a nanosecond of him doing that, my hand was on the door handle and I threw the door open. I was going to choke the guy. I don't know what I was going to do. I saw I needed to protect my mom's honor. I wasn't doing it for me. She, thank God, grabbed me back and she decided to just drive away. But your instincts kick in when you want to protect those that you love. And that's what this idea here is. You don't do it for you, you're doing it for Hashem. It says here, what is it we can do for God? God doesn't need anything. What is it we can do for him? The idea of connecting the Shekhinah, Hashem and his Shekhinah, to this lower world. And we're going to see a lot more about this concept of this lower world later in the book. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, is the divine light that exists, also in revealed and in hidden ways, in the existence of this world. The concept of Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu, in Aramaic, surpasses as me'alu me'ever this world. In order to connect, to unify, to unite Hashem's Shekhinah, is the idea to take Hashem and His Shekhinah to connect them, to take If Hashem Shekhinah is here, Hashem is me'alu me'ever, above and beyond the existence of this world, when we do these mitzvot and we bring this connection together, we are bringing kavod into this world and we're doing the will of Hashem. And therefore, every time we do a mitzvah, let's read you a note I wrote down here. Every time we do a mitzvah in my copy, we're trying to connect Hashem, the Kucha Brichu, and Shechinta, the Shekhinah, the heavenly world and this world. As we say, Hashem Yichud, the Yud K and the Vav K, bring goodness, rather godliness into this world. As I just said, I want to make sure you saw that. When a tzaddik does this mitzvah, at all times, that's his purpose. To bring this, make the world more hospitable, so to speak, for the Shekhinah. What does that mean? Let's assume for a moment you're having guests. Now, we just now went through a time period where a lot of you may have had more than one guest over. We had one for the Shabbat Chol HaMoed. Since we've made Aliyah, it's the first time we've had that many people in our house. Every single bed, including the mamad, was filled. Families just was great Shabbat. It was even made greater by the fact that my daughter and son-in-law hosted all the meals. Mamash, great. And you can make them feel at home. You can make them feel comfortable. You can make the rooms, the house more hospitable. You can tell them, bring your own sheets. No, don't bring your own sheets. Of course, don't schlep sheets with you. You could tell them, maybe you want to bring a dish, which is nice. Or you can say, it's all on us. Just come and bring yourself. However you do it, we deal with guests. But Hashem, so to speak, we make this world more hospitable for the Shekhinah every time we do a mitzvah. And when we do it for the right reason, which is just the Yachta Hashem Kucha Brichu Shechinta, to unite this lower world and Hashem, makes it even more hospitable and spreads the kavod of Hashem into this world. Okay. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me see if I can get this to work. Do you see in front of you a video from YouTube? Just shake your head yes or no. You do not. Okay. Hold on one second. Let me unshare. Oh, you do. Okay, let's try it again then anyways. And share screen. Make sure sound is on. And go here. Okay. I had shown you once, at least once, I had this gentleman who gives a nice summary of a parak or chapter of Tanya. I found another person. All these, I like mixing it up a little bit because instead of I give you a summary and before we move on, it's nice to hear another perspective. He's also, I think he's Australian, this individual. So let's just take this. Well, we got to get to this. Get past this. Get back. Now, you can hear and see, yes? Good. Okay, here we go. I'm going to minimize this part here, and here we go.
In chapter 10 of the Tanya, we learn about the tzaddik. The tzaddik, literally the righteous person, refers really in Hasidic thought to a kind of superhero, someone who has completely transformed all his animal urges. And he or she has become totally devoted to the divine, never even has the urge for self-gratification, totally in love with God all the time. And obviously when you read this, your first question is, well, what's this got to do with me? The Alter Rebbe, author of the Tanya, even calls this book the book for the in-betweener, for the Beinoni, implying that you're never going to become a tzaddik. This is something totally unachievable for you. So why do we have to even read about it? So, number of answers. First of all, obviously, the simple answer is for context. In order to understand the Beinoni, the in-betweener, somewhere in between two other levels, you need to understand those two levels to have context. That's the simple answer. But there's a little bit more to it than that. A second answer we could suggest is the Tanya wants to show us what is possible, what is achievable by a human being. Someone who is a tzaddik, a saint, someone who is extremely refined. What's it like inside to be totally in rapture with God all the time? So That's kind of insight number 2, what's humanely possible, even maybe not for people of our caliber, the general readers. And number 3, and I think this is an important point, to be a tzaddik means that you are on this level all the time, 24/7, you're enraptured with God. But that doesn't mean that people such as ourselves in peak moments can't have similar experiences. For example, one of the hallmarks of the tzaddik, which is explained in chapter 10, is that he or she is always observing the mitzvahs, the commandments of the Torah, for the sake of God, not for the sake of self. He or she is doing it, l'shem yichud, kudshabrich shchinte. The only intention is to unite, to heal the cosmic,
which is what we were just now talking about at the end of the chapter.
Realm, to make the earth a heavenly abode, etc. Now, tell me,
it's not coming out clear at all.
have that kind of experience?
It's not coming out clear? One second. It's not, you do not hear it? You do hear it. Okay.
I mean, are we always selfish all the time? Are we always animalistic all the time? I hope not. I think sometimes, I hope at least sometimes, that we're enraptured with God and feel utter passion, that sometimes we can do the mitzvahs purely for God's sake, purely to heal the Shekhinah, the divine feminine earth, which is oppressed and downtrodden. In fact, later on in the Tanya, in chapter 41, he states very clearly this is an intention that we should try and at least aim for as much as we can. So the tzaddik, in addition to giving us context of what is a Beinoni, in addition to showing us what a human being is capable of, the description here is also showing us that in our good moments, in our peak moments, we can taste at least some of this experience of being totally and utterly enraptured with God.
בתוך מוחו של נשיא רוסיה.
Now, let me close that. Okay, so what we saw here, the summary is very good because it picks up, I purposely did this, where, like, especially that last point of the chapter, liachta kudshabrichu, this concept of unification, concept of one person does a mitzvah, plus the idea, which we didn't discuss, that someone didn't ask, but he answered, and I'm going to answer it again, is that why would we have this in the book? If the whole purpose of this book is the Sefer Beinonim, why is he talking about the tzaddik? And why in the next chapter, in Yud, which we're going to start in a minute, is he going to talk about the Russia? Talk about the Beinonim. So the obvious one, which he didn't say, is to understand what a Beinoni is, you still have to know what a tzaddik and a Russia. You still have to know what your Beinoni of what. So that's why I'm surprised he didn't say that. If he did, I missed it. But even though it's almost impossible for the average person to be the tzaddik gamur, as he describes, that everything 24/7, the actions, the thoughts, the what we call speech, thought, speech, and action, machshava, dibur, maaseh, are all purposefully done and only for the sake of Hashem and no ego whatsoever, we still can, on occasion, accomplish it. Take a mitzvah, one mitzvah. If it's a guy and you're putting on tefillin, for one moment, think that say the l'shem yichud or the hineni muchan, what's in your siddur, and think the only reason you're doing this mitzvah is because of this reason. And you're going to have it in mind when you're doing the mitzvah. And for a woman, any mitzvah you're doing, whatever it might be. For a guy, any mitzvah you're doing. Pick one. Even if it's once a day, once a week, once a month, something. And for that moment, when there's no netiyat to ra, when there's no inclination towards something wrong, I'm talking even a thought, when you're focused specifically on doing it for no ego whatsoever, at that moment, you're tzaddik v'tovlo. That's what his point is in that little video. And that's what the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, is telling us as well, that you have the capacity. You may not have the capacity for your entire life to do that. You might not have it for more than a day, but you can have it here and there when you decide to do it. And it requires thought. And I think that the timing of having this idea right after Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, based on what I said at the beginning of this class, of this being a proving ground coming up, that pick something, again, at the beginning we talked before Rosh Hashanah, we talked about, picking something to work on. I'm very happy. I heard some people that really did want to make some changes, adjustments in their lives. Now let's take it to the next level. Take it to the level where you pick a mitzvah and you focus on it, and you do it with no klipa, with no ego, with no anything other than to serve Hashem. Not because I need to do the mitzvah, I want to do this tzedakah, I want to do this chesed, but only because Hashem wants it, and I want to bring kabbalah of Hashem and to unify Hashem's glory into this world. That moment you do that, and it may be 3 seconds, it may be 5 minutes. For those 3 seconds, those 5 minutes, you are mamish a tzaddik gamur at that moment. It's powerful. It's mamish powerful. Tov. Which brings us to the other end of the coin, or the spectrum, literally the other end of the spectrum. If you look, let me just put it up on the screen. I'm going to look first at a couple of lines at the beginning, and I'm going to take a look at a slide after that. Okay. I'm just going to look at the first line in this. Why did I do that? That's not what I want to do here. These words right here. We have seen this expression before in Tanya, which is Ze L'umat Ze. Everything that Hashem created in this world, in Kedusha, there is a corresponding opposite. Lahavdil, a yin and yang, a black and white. Speaking of which, just parenthetically, I was teaching someone a few years ago who was learning, she's now Gioret for many years, but to be a Gioret, to convert. And she learned something I never heard. I thought was pretty cool. I'm saying black and white. She said that there's this, the fast days of the year are summed up with male, female, black, white, hot, cold. So what are you talking about? I had absolutely no idea. Then I started to think about it. Black and white. You have Yom Kippur is white. Black is Tisha B'Av. Hot and cold, at least in the northern hemisphere, you have Shiva Sabbath Tammuz because it's hot, and Sabbath Tevet, it's cold. And male and man and woman, you had Tzon Gedalia for Gedalia ben Achikam, and Queen Esther for the other one. So that was very clever. So now, putting that aside, this popped in. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So if they might as well share that with you. You can mentioning the idea of black and white. So you have this. Everything Hashem created, there's the opposite. You have the good, the bad. You have the Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara. You have Kedusha, you have Gimel Klipot HaTmeot, and you have Klipa in the middle. And that's what this expression means, Zeh L'umat Zeh. Rasha v'Tovlo, L'umat Tzadik v'Ralo. On the one hand, you have the Rasha v'Tovlo, which we just spent time in chapter 10 learning about. The other end of the spectrum, we have we are going to learn about Rasha v'Tovlo in this chapter, relative to, on the other side of the coin, what we just learned about the Tzadik v'Ralo. Now, the implication automatically becomes that if they are no, it's not the right word. They're negative images of each other. You know, this is the tchum of film, where you actually had people who would do more than digital work. They would do film. My early days of photography, not like Dave, who's a master photographer. If you're not familiar with his work, dang, you got to follow him. But I was an amateur photographer. I took pictures. I blew up the poster size. I sold some shows and did some events. Okay, fine. But I finished literally at the beginning of the digital age. I started phasing it out at the beginning of the digital age. So everything I did was with film and with negatives. Before I met Ali, I had thousands of negatives. I just, whatever, they're gone. But that's what this is like. This is a negative image. You have the positive and you have the negative. So the positive is the last chapter. Is the Tzadik v'Tovlo. You have the Tzadik v'Ralo has a corresponding Rasha v'Tovlo. So therefore, if that's the case, and we're going to see there's a concept of Rasha v'Tovlo also, but we're not going to get there. I'm sorry, a Rasha v'Ralo. We'll get there. But we're talking right now about these two middle extremes. You have the Tzadik v'Ralo, which we had in the last chapter. Again, it's not a Tzadik that does some bad stuff. It's not something that happens bad to him. It means the definition we said is he does everything perfectly right, except he has sometimes machashavot that in inclination to something wrong. And that he still can be called a tzaddik gamur. So therefore, and remember, there's thousands and thousands of possible levels of bitul. Remember, we talked about this concept of nullification. There's only a small percentage. There's a little bit more percentage. Therefore, based on this concept of zeh l'umat zeh, that comes to Rasha v'Tovlo, it's the same idea. I'm going to give you a general description. I'm going to look at something for Rav Ginsburg. That the Rasha v'Tovlo means that the guy is a Russia, but there's still some good in him in a sense. What does that mean? That he has a small amount of good netiyot. He has a good inclination sometimes in his thoughts to do the right thing. Where there's a famous story in the Gemara. It's brought in at least one place I know of, maybe more. The story is told of one of my heroes of Jewish history, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai saved Judaism after the destruction of the second Beit of the first Beit Hamikdash. After the destruction of the second Beit Hamikdash, he went to the governor, the procurate, whatever the proper term is. He said, "Nuli Yavne v'chachameh." He said, "Give me. We're going to replant the Judaism, central Judaism from Jerusalem. We're going to put it in Yavne." And he was granted the ability to do that. Why am I mentioning this? Oh, so years and years later, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is lying on his deathbed, and he has his students come in to visit him to say goodbye to their Rav. And they say to him, Rabbeinu Barchein, says, Rabbi, give us a blessing. He said, Yehemor Shamayim Alechem Kamora Basar V'Dam. May the fear of God be upon you like the fear of man. They said, Ad Kan, that's the big bracha you're giving us? He said, Halavai, if only. What does that mean? So the Gemara explains. When a person goes to do an avera, to do a sin, they don't say, "Ooh, I hope God doesn't see me." But when they go to do something wrong, or they go to steal, also an avera, they will say, "Oh, I hope so-and-so doesn't see me. I better do this quietly so no one sees me." So you should have the fear of God should be upon you like the fear of humans. The same meaning. What does that mean? The awareness. So the guy might be a Russia. He might be a Russia. He's going to go steal. But he says, I don't know. Maybe it's not the right thing for me to do right now. But he's a ganav. He's a thief. So maybe he's not stealing right now because he got his little twinge of good thought. So maybe that's the Rasha B'Tova. We're going to say we're not going to see the whole definition now. And I do want to take a look at the introduction to this chapter from Rav Ginsburg. Okay. What time is it now? You know what? It's going to be too long for this. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. Next week, let me just double check. Baruch Hashem, I've got lots of stuff coming up again. I asked my daughter this morning, what time is candlelighting tonight? She's like, every night was candlelighting for the last few weeks. Next Wednesday, Tuesday, is the 25th. We have a Sheva B'Chol, but after the class. Okay, good. Okay, very good. So, Bezrat Hashem, next week we'll have class. We'll pick it up from this introduction of what exactly is this concept of Russia. And second, how many Shabbatot left in this week? I think there's 3 more Shabbatot this week, Dave. I think at least. Yeah. Yeah, you have this morning, you had to stop thinking, what day is today for the Yom? Yom Shlishi. Right. Right, still is. So, okay, so Bezrat Hashem, we get back together. I'll try to forget the fancy English next week on Tuesday night, Tuesday Yom Shlishi at 7:00. Be there, aloha. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Have a great evening.